snap-on power is significantly, because you know that's a good rush of torque right off the line. Imagine a guy surfing through a wave and he's like holding his hand out into the wave and all that stuff. That's kind of what it feels like to me. If you go down and the battery catches fire, it will burn for 5 hours.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Yammy Noob, and today I am finally going to see if you can actually live with an electric motorcycle. Stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. That is right, we have often maligned this here Zero SRS for being a ripoff. You have to buy a bunch of features that are already on the motorcycle. You have to deal with charging this thing. Can it go 90 miles on a single charge? Who knows? We're gonna find all of that stuff out today, and we're going to see what it's like to live with this here motorcycle. Now, before we get it out on the road, I do want to point out the fact that I will not be able to take this motorcycle home with me. And there's one big reason that I just want to get out there right now. I don't have a charging station. I cannot charge this motorcycle at my apartment. There's no spot where I can plug it in my garage. So we're going to have to modify things just a little bit today because I can't ride it all in one day and I can't take it home. So it's gonna feel a little bit different today, and I just wanted to let you guys know right off the gate. Now, before we see if the Zero can handle an 11-mile commute down the highway, I gotta take a second to remind you that our giveaway on this Triumph Speed Triple Double R is wrapping up in 3 days. Use the code CRUMPET on shop.yammynoob.co and you will be able to get yourself max entries on any merch purchase over on our store. It's the perfect way to get yourself entered to win, just in case you've been procrastinating at home and you do not want to miss this here motorcycle. Remember, code CRUMPET, max entries on any merch purchase on shop.yammynoob.co. Now let's get out on the road.
Alrighty guys, we are gearing up to head out on what is going to stand in for my commute, and I wanted to show you the startup process for this here motorcycle. It's a lot less exciting than other bikes. So you turn the key on, you push the thing, the green says go, and then you go, just like that. It's fine, I guess. I kind of like a big rumbly startup though. So one cool thing though is you don't have to worry about feathering the clutch at all. It's a really easy bike to commute on, and that is one thing that I will give electric motorcycles over ICE bikes, is they're comically easy to commute on. They're so simple. They require a lot less thought than your average ICE bike. You're not having to deal with the clutch, you're not having to deal with shifting gears. You just kind of twist and go. And as a commuter, that's actually really nice. It's nice to not have to sit here and think about a bunch of stuff while you're trying to decompress from the end of your work day. It is nice to be able to ride off into the sunset, as it were. Trying to adjust the mirrors. The mirrors are in a weird spot on this bike, I'm not gonna lie. It's not like on a Sportster where you're looking underneath the handlebars. You're actually looking over the handlebars down at the mirrors, so you have to look past the handlebars. It's sort of weird. I don't love this setup. I kind of wish that they just had, bar ends on this. That would be better in my opinion, but I don't know if bar ends are legal for manufacturers to put on bikes. As we're sitting here going stoplight to stoplight, one thing that's important to impress on y'all is that this motorcycle is so much cooler temperature-wise than your average ICE motorcycle. So if you are commuting somewhere like Texas, where it is currently hotter than Satan's right fiery ring piece outside, this is a great way to commute around. You're not going to be adding a bunch of heat, assuming you can't, get a car. You're not going to be adding a bunch of heat to your situation and melting while you're riding. It's just hot, so as long as you can handle the heat, it's not going to get more toasty in your ambient area, which is nice. You know, we've all sat on, or well, maybe you haven't, but I've sat on a lot of motorcycles that, you know, they're cool and I'd love to commute on them, but my God, are they just so toasty when you're sitting on it, and that's unpleasant. Now, one thing that really irks me, it really annoys me about this, is we have two rocker switches right here. The mode switch, and then you have the indicator switch. They're both rockers, and they're both on the same side. That's super, super, super annoying. I really don't like that. I wish that the mode button was like a toggle up here, and the indicators were just down here with, I don't know, like the cruise control button or something. The button layout on this motorcycle is a little silly, I'm not gonna lie. Because we don't actually have to use an ignition button, the ignition button is now pulling double duty as cruise control. So it turns the cruise control situation on, I think. Let's see, did it turn it on? I actually can't read the dash. There it is. You have to press and hold it and then it comes on. And then I think you just tap it once you get to your cruising speed. So, yep, you just tap it, and I'm cruising at 65. I don't love this cruise control setup. There's no set reset. You just and there's no forward roll off to turn it off. So you have to use the button to kill it, or I'm assuming if you hit the front brake, it'll kill it as well. But I mean, give me an actual proper cruise control setup. You have so much button real estate on here. I don't understand why it's like that. Now, little niggles aside, how does the bike actually work as a commuter? Pretty well, I'm not gonna lie. It's comfortable. The ergonomics on it are relaxed enough that you can sort of just sit upright. If it were me, I would prefer being on the SRF, the naked bike, because this windscreen is putting wind in the wrong spot. It's hitting me square in the face, and I don't love that. But you know what? If I was commuting and that's all I wanted to use my motorcycle for, I could see this as working. You know, my commute is 11 miles in sport mode. I get 78 miles worth of range, depending on how you ride. That's more than plenty for me to get to and from my apartment, which is great. The only problem is, as I said before, I don't have a spot to charge a motorcycle at my apartment. There's nowhere I can charge it, which is a huge problem if you want people to adopt these motorcycles. So, functionally, it's a good commuting package. I can't fault it. If you have a charger at your office, you can stretch your range even further. You've got the nice little frunk situation here, which is good enough to carry the entire charging cable setup and probably a couple of sandwiches. It's actually decently sized because they don't have to put a gas tank on the thing. Also, let's be real, the torque on this is pretty good. It's a pretty zippy little bike as long as you keep it under triple digits. Above triple digits, it starts to slow down significantly. It doesn't snap on power as significantly, because you know that's a good rush of torque right off the line. And as a commuter, you want a torque first motor, I suppose, not an engine, a motor. Anybody who rides an electric bike will tell you that these are torque first. So for the commuting segment, I gotta give this bike a nice thumbs up. It's smooth, it's composed, it rolls down the road well. The windscreen doesn't work so good, but you can fix that. And the range is more than enough for just about anybody to get to and from their office. I'm in sport mode too, by the way. I'm never gonna take it out of sport mode because that's where I think it's the best, and I'm still getting plenty of range out of it. So yeah, thumbs up. Now, let's get this bike back into the shop and talk about more specifically some of my favorite and least favorite things on this motorcycle, because there's a lot I can talk about, but I've got some specific problems with this bike and some things that I think are really cool. So let's get back in the shop and have a little conversation.
So we're gonna start off with the negative stuff today because I'm feeling spicy. And the first thing that I notice about this motorcycle is that it looks like a simulacrum of an actual sport bike. It doesn't look great to me, especially sitting in the cockpit. The look down is this big, wide, flat fairing. It's very plasticky. It doesn't feel great in the hands, and it sounds kind of like a beginner bike when you're smacking on it. I don't like the way that this thing feels. It's not a premium bike feel, and it doesn't look like a premium motorcycle either. So as far as the looks go, that's a big old thumbs down for me. But a nice positive to go along with that is that the throttle feel on this motorcycle is not terrible. A lot of times when you get electric bikes that aren't tuned particularly well, the throttle feel is a little bit loose, a little bit disconnected from your actual riding experience. This feels pretty good, pretty linear. It feels like it's been dialed in by an actual motorcycle rider and not an engineer and a computer scientist, which is actually really nice. Unfortunately, we also have to deal with the fact that this bike is very heavy for what it is. It's basically like an Interceptor, like one of the old Honda VFRs. If you want a sport bike riding experience, not really this motorcycle. One cool thing on this bike though, we do have a frunk in here, which unfortunately does go away if you get the extended battery. They just plonk another battery right in here. But the frunk is good enough to carry your entire charging cable. Pretty good. You can actually fit a lot of stuff in here. And honestly, if you're going to use this thing like it's intended to be as a commuter, then you know what? Sure, okay, I can live with having a frunk. Might be a little bit nerdy, but it does work. One thing that does really annoy me though is the charging process with this motorcycle. So if you don't have a charging station around, you have to figure out how you're gonna plug in your motorcycle to the wall. Luckily, I have a big long extension cord and then you just plug it in. But I want y'all to listen to something. It's gonna take a second for it to realize that it's plugged in, and it's gonna go through these processes of checking and rechecking. But you're also going to hear the electric motor start spinning. And what it's doing is it's spinning it in reverse. You're gonna hear it spin really, really fast, and then it's gonna start slowing down. That's there to remind you that you have not bought the upgraded charging package. Listen. Oh, there it goes. It could spin a whole heck of a lot faster. It just decides not to because you haven't paid a bunch of money to unlock the faster charge time. And to go up to 95% from 59% on the battery is going to take 3 hours and 25 minutes. That's a big old negative for this motorcycle. Now, with all that being said, let's take this thing out on a twisty road and see if there's any redeeming quality to this thing whatsoever.
Now, chucking this thing down a twisty road is sort of an interesting prospect. Let me start off by saying that I broke my promise. I found a mode called Canyon, and Canyon mode feels just like sport mode, but with a little bit more regenerative braking. And I appreciate that because I like a little bit of regen braking on these bikes. It just makes it feel a little bit more natural to the way that I like to ride. I like to do a little bit more engine braking, and it's cool that Canyon helps you out with that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the ergonomics on this machine for like a sporty ride. They're a little bit wonky because this literally just feels like a naked bike but with a fairing on it. I would not be surprised if there is not a single difference between the SRF and the SRS besides this one's got some plastics on it. Side to side, it is a little bit heavy going through those little kind of quicker chicanes back there. It's a little heavy, I'm not gonna lie. And the weight distribution on the bike feels weird. It doesn't feel like it's quite dialed in just yet. Yeah, don't go, suburban people. the weight is higher up on the motorcycle, and the wheelbase is feels a little bit longer. Don't get me wrong, it's totally rideable. It just doesn't feel 100% natural, at least not just yet. I feel like if I spent a lot more time with it, and I wasn't riding a bunch of other more normal motorcycles back to back to back to back with this, I would gel with it a lot more, a lot faster. But my palate gets cleansed a lot quicker than most other riders, so you'll have to take this experience with a grain of salt. Now, one cool thing about this ride is that you feel every single little bump and nook in the cranny, or in the road surface, because there's nothing vibrating or shaking on the bike. You feel a connection with the road that you don't get on an ICE motorcycle, which is really cool. That is one thing that I've always sort of enjoyed about these electric bikes, is they have this sort of, it's not visceral, it's almost like coexistence, almost, in a weird way, to get more heady and spacey with it. It's like you're gliding on top of the road, and you put your hand, or like, you know, imagine a guy surfing through a wave and he's like holding his hand out into the wave and all that stuff. That's kind of what it feels like to me to be riding one of these motorcycles on a twisty road. It's got this very, very flowy, very connected feel to the area around you, because you're not hearing this shaking and rumbling from the motorcycle. It's actually really nice. It's kind of meditative almost. I would love for the opportunity to take one of these to a racetrack. However, a lot of racetracks won't let you run this. Yam actually tried to take this thing up to ECR to do a track test with it, and they said, no, you can't run it on the track, because if you go down and the battery catches fire, it will burn for 5 hours, and it takes so much water to try and contain the fire that they don't have enough on track, so they can't control a fire if this thing goes down, which is terrifying. It's terrifying when you think that we're sitting on top of a thing that will burn for 4 hours, 5 hours almost, and you can't stop it. It's like, you know, a nuclear reactor going critical or something like that. Definitely more than a little bit terrifying. Power-wise, I would say that this bike feels like an MT-09, sorta like maybe like an MT-09 in the like standard mode, the chill mode, whatever that one is. It's like lower power mode. It's like an MT-09 that's always in the right gear, but that does make the riding experience feel a little bit plain. It feels like it's taking away this sort of skilled aspect from the ride, right? You're not having to select the gear, you're not having to usher it down the road. It's more like the bike is taking you somewhere. And I don't love that, but you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I could see people enjoying that. Somebody who, you know, perhaps doesn't enjoy having to work a clutch and all that stuff. This could be for them, for sure. Now again, I do want to mention the range. I would not be able to take this out on my normal loop because the range just doesn't work. I couldn't take it down the twisty roads that I'd want to take it down because I just couldn't get there. I couldn't get there, or maybe I could and I couldn't get back. So take that for what you will. I cannot go on the ride that I want to go on with this motorcycle. Just gonna say that. Now, with all that being said, let's take this thing back in the shop for my favorite part of these living widths, where I pull the Discord, see if they have any questions, and I sit down and answer as many of them as I possibly can. So let's dive right in with some Discord questions.
Diving right in, we have a question from Not That Nate that says, well, not really a question, mostly just put a counter on how many times people ask you about it in the time that you have it. No one cares. It's just a motorcycle to a normie, and to motorcyclists, they're like, oh, neat, it's a electric motorcycle. I don't really care. Sorry, just no one actually like is interested in it unless they're an electric nerd. Fat Tiger, how do you budget your meals / lifestyle around the subscription necessities of the next generation motorcycle? Currently, it's not subscription currently, but I could see a world in which Zero goes the BMW route and they're like, yeah, instead of paying $300 to permanently unlock your heated grips, why don't you just subscribe to them during the winter riding months and pay $18 a month? It's just a dystopia that I don't want to consider. Squid Ceviche asks, is it loud? No, it's actually really not. You can hear the motor whining over wind noise in your helmet and stuff, but it's actually one of the nicer things I like about it is how quiet it is. You can actually sort of chill and enjoy the world around you while you're on a twisty road. And like I said, it can be a little meditative, actually. Oyster Cracker asks, as far as usefulness goes, would you say that it'd be practical for someone who lives close to work and would only use it to commute around town, assuming there are reasonable storage available? Yeah, honestly, if you have a place where you can charge it and you're not going all that far, sure, yeah. I mean, it's a totally workable option. I wouldn't spend $22,000 $500 on it, or whatever it costs brand new. I would just get the base model Zero. So, Rebel Rider, what type of motorcycle rider would you recommend this for? Don't know. I wouldn't actually recommend it to a motorcyclist, honestly. I would recommend it to somebody who's got a Tesla or, you know, wants to pretend that they're doing something good for the environment. I don't really see this as being useful for the average motorcyclist. It doesn't allow you to do the things you want to do. Stompy, have you had problems with the charging network? Does having to spend time charging it lessen its appeal? Yes and yes. I can't actually take this home. I don't have a place to charge it. So there you go. It's really limited my ability to make this video. I can't go do stuff that I would normally do with it because normally I go out like 70 miles, 70, 80 miles on a lot of these rides, and I'd be screwed. I'd be stuck out in the middle of nowhere with having to wait. I mean, it's gonna take 3 hours to go from 60% to full. That's not okay. This is a good question from Whippy, who asks, would you rather ride this Zero or Corgi's custom electric? For those of you who don't know, Corgi in the Discord server is building an electric motorcycle, and I would not want to get within about 10 feet of that thing. I would worry about it shooting electric sparks at me because some dude just screwed it together in his garage. I'm pretty sure it's just gonna melt your eyebrows off, Corgi. I've seen the pictures of the melted batteries. Keep that away from me. Sven, is riding the Zero noticeably cooler than riding a regular sport bike since there isn't an engine between your legs, or do the batteries radiate about the same amount of heat while you're riding? You don't feel any heat coming from this bike. At a stop, you don't feel anything. While you're on the road, you don't feel anything. I actually, like I said earlier, I think it's a great option if you are commuting, you want to do it on a motorcycle, but you live somewhere in Texas where it's really, really hot all the time. Really nice to have this thing and not have to worry so much about boiling at a stoplight. We have a question here that is a little tough to answer because I couldn't put enough miles down to really get a reliable number for you. But charge time difference between the city use and highway use, for example, commuting up and down 35. Also, does it have USB ports, all that good stuff? Yes, it's got USB ports in the front. You're going to be running the batteries down while you're doing it, so don't charge your phone if you gotta get somewhere. If you're, you know, if you've got plenty of charge left in the battery, sure, plug your phone in. But you're literally robbing Peter to pay Paul on this thing. As far as use on the highway, if you're in the eco mode and you're not hammering on the throttle, you can squeeze a little bit more mileage out of this, but I'm never gonna get more than about 70 miles out of this thing before it dies. Just gonna tell you that for a fact. Uncle Ben asks a question, what is the shelf life of the electronics and battery? Is it a bike I can ride for a few weeks without having to charge the battery, or is it going to cost me a lot in maintenance? So, Maintenance costs on this, virtually zero. Assuming the battery doesn't go bad, in which case you're basically going to need to charge, or you're going to need to pay for a whole new one, which could be like thousands of dollars. I think it was like $4,000 to replace one of these batteries. As far as shelf life goes, you don't always have to be charging it. We've let it sit for a while without charging, and it went from 100 to like 91 over 3 to 4 weeks. So you don't need to just leave it constantly plugged in and trickle charging, which, you know, they say it's bad for your phone, so this is basically just a two-wheeled phone. Food for thought. Toaster asks if I would rather ride this or the Energica Ego. I would actually ride the Ego over this. This doesn't have anything going on that makes it feel special. I haven't ridden an Ego, but I would imagine it's a lot closer to the Livewire in the sense that it feels more motorcycle-y and less like a magic carpet. Last question today comes from Vegan. Are there any winterizing you need to do to electric bikes that are different from ICE bikes? Not really. You don't need to drain any oil or any fluids or anything. You would probably just want to bleed the brakes when you're done with it and then put it up on stands if you're going to leave it in the garage. You don't have to worry about the battery like going bad over the winter. You might just need to plug it in to charge every now and again so it's not just sitting completely empty. But other than that, it's pretty low maintenance, and that is one of the cool things about these bikes is you just don't have to worry about maintaining them. They kind of just run. You know, you got to do the things like tires and suspension and some of that stuff, greasing pivot points and all that, but as far as maintaining a moving engine, nothing to worry about there. Now, let's get this bike out on the road and start finalizing my thoughts on this here motorcycle.
So we're back out on the highway here for my final thoughts, and that's because I always like to put these motorcycles where I think they're the best. And unfortunately for this motorcycle, I think the best place for it is commuting on the highway. It's not my favorite motorcycle to go do twisty road stuff. It's nice, it's fun, but I also can't get where I want to go. You know, I can't. I'm sorry. There's no way for me to get out and go see the things that I want to see on this bike. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It was going to take 2 hours to go from like 90% to full, to give you an idea. And yeah, you can pay to have more charging speed on this thing, but I don't want to pay for more charging speed. I just want the damn thing to charge as fast as it humanly possibly can, and for $22,000 I damn well better get it. You know, I don't want to have to spend a whole bunch of money on a whole bunch of other stuff so that I could possibly make it another 15 miles and then be able to go from 0 to 80% in like an hour. The kind of rides that I like to do are hundreds of miles in a day. You know, I'll go out to Fredericksburg and take the long way and then take the long way home, and that can easily hit 200, 250 miles. And good luck. Good luck doing it on this bike, man. What more can I say? This bike is a good commuting package, but that's all it is. If you want to be an early adopter, okay, maybe, but you don't need to spend $22,500 to do it. Just get the like base Model Zero that doesn't have the super crazy thing and doesn't have the Cypher 3 operating system, so you actually get everything that you want. You know, you don't have to pay to unlock the heated grips and all that garbage. I would just get a base Model Zero, and I would just use it to poodle around town. Because at the end of the day, that's all the Big Dick Zero's all about. It's the only thing it's good for, is poodling around town. Again, I can't go do the stuff I want to do on this motorcycle. It's just not there. Maybe in a few years it'll be, but as it sits right now, there's not a whole lot you can do with this bike, especially if you can't even take it to a track. Like, okay, let's run this scenario out. It's like, okay, I want to be an economic, or not economic, I want to be an ecological track day warrior. I want to be Greenpeace for a racetrack. I'm going to get my electric motorcycle and I'm going to go rip laps and then come in, plug it into charge while I'm cooling off, or they're running a car session on track. So I can't be on track anyway, so I'll just charge it. Okay, sure. First of all, you've got the issues we talked about in the Twisty Road segment, where some tracks don't let these on because they don't have the fire equipment. Secondly, this engine overheats after about 2 laps, according to Chris over at Eurocycle. He said he took it out on track and he couldn't get more than 2 laps in before it overheats. And then, let's say you do run a nice long session. You can manage to squeeze out 20 laps because you're doing them in Antarctica or something like that, and it's really cold. And you run the battery down. You get down to like 50%. If your intermediate session, like the next session is half an hour, you might get another 20 or 30% battery, and then you use it down. You might get like 3 sessions out of a day. Maybe that's all you want, but I would just use a gas engine, man. This thing really is just, I hate to say it, but it's really just a toy. It's a toy for folks with a lot of money and a multi-car garage where they can put their commuter car, their significant other's commuter car, their Ducati, and then their electric motorcycle. That's how it is. I gotta calls it like I sees it. Now, I always do a little bit of a arbitrary rating on this one. It's really hard for me to rate this. I don't like this motorcycle. I don't like the way it feels. It just isn't doing the things that I want it to do. So no matter how I rate it, it's going to be negative. But it's like a mountain of empty batteries sitting underground in a landfill, just leaking. There you go. Now guys, I know I was a little bit harsh on this motorcycle today, but it did have some highlights, and I'd be interested to hear your all's thoughts on it in the comments down below. So let me know what you thought of this, and you know, just your thoughts on electric motorcycles generally. Remember, we got this from Eurocycle. They happen to sell Zeros. They've got a whole bunch of other ICE motorcycles. If you're interested in getting yourself a nice bike like this, click the links down in the description below. Check them out. And while you're down there, you might as well check out shop.yamanoob.co, where you can get yourself some good gear and enter to win our giveaway motorcycles. I will catch you guys in the next episode of Yami Noob, and until then, I'm gonna go put the Zero back in the garage, and God willing, I won't ride it again. See you later.
Keep watching Yami Noob.